Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar on some recommendations and some tips and tricks on if you are going through KEY2ACT job closing at the end of the month. Our presenter here today is Tim Braun, and I am going to hand it over to him very shortly, and he can talk a little bit more about what he'll be covering today, and then obviously get into some of those steps. Just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, so you can, and you'll receive a copy of this as well. So if you want to refer back to it at a later time or share it with any of your colleagues. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, I will be monitoring the questions panel in the GoToWebinar toolbar, and where you can put your questions in there. We'll also make sure that we take time at the end of the webinar where I can take you off mute, and you could ask your questions that way as well. So with that, Tim, I will hand it over to you.
Okay. For some reason, my screen just flipped over.
Oh,
so
that's
I got the PowerPoint shown on the other screen. I didn't even touch it. Please hold.
Okay. Well, while Tim's doing that, this is very perfectly well timed, Tim. I can plug our GPUC conference then. So just let you know, everyone, that our GPUC event is fast approaching here on November 14th through the 16th. So if you haven't signed up, please do. We'd love to see you there. Oh, and I'm seeing your PowerPoint again here, Tim. So.
Okay, it's not the big screen, but it'll work. Okay, so we'll be going over KEY2ACT job cost month-end closing. So for the agenda, we'll talk about some of the preparation you can do before closing. We're going to talk about closing jobs as well. You don't have to wait until the end of the month to close jobs. You can do it really anytime during the month, but for customers using completed contract, you want to make sure that you get those jobs that can be closed done by the end of that month. Because with that option, you're recognizing the revenue, when you close the job. We'll look at some of the reconciliation tools and reports that you can use to tie job cost modules to the general ledger accounts. Some final pre-close items you can do to finalize your revenue recognition, and then the actual month-end closing part, which will include the creation of revenue recognition entries. So the first thing is to make a good backup. Before you do your month-end close, you want to back up your Dynamics and all your company SQL databases. And we have customers, some run nightly SQL jobs, so they do a backup every night. But the one time where you have to have one, of course, is before month end in case something goes wrong. And I'm sure a lot of you are probably doing this already, but just a reminder. And job cost utilities, you can run these utilities in a couple of different ones. Reconcile Jobs will add up the detail tables to equal the amounts that you see in the job status window, the job level summary amounts. And that's another thing where you can set up a SQL job to run that nightly. So if you want to do that, a lot of customers run it at like 3 in the morning. You don't want to run it when there are other users in the system. Reconcile Billing does the same thing, kind of validates the detail to the billing amounts. Likewise for bill codes. And that one's for if you have AIA jobs, it'll make sure all the details add up to the bill total to date amounts. And subcontractors will do the same thing, taking the transaction levels and rolling those up. So over here on the right is where you can run these utilities from the GPUI. Reconcile Jobs has an option to validate job transactions. And when you mark that, if there's an invalid record in your database, like a transaction with an invalid job number or cost code, after you run this process, it'll print a list of those transactions, and then you can choose to either delete them or leave them as is. And in either case, you're going to want to look into it and make a correction if you need one. If you don't mark that option, it's just going to re-add the totals. So basically, it zeroes out job master amounts and rebuilds them from the transaction levels on up, not only for costs, but also for estimates, forecasts, and those things, change orders. If you run it as a SQL job, it will not do the validate part. So the validate part, you have to run from the UI. Running it as a SQL job or unmarking that checkbox simply re-adds all the numbers to make sure they're accurate. And there's an option to print an audit report. You can choose to print this for all jobs, run reconcile, job number, or a range. So sometimes if you see something that looks off for one individual job and job status, for instance, you could just pick it and run it for one job. Reconcile Billing, this one. If you don't pick a job range, it's going to print for all, it's going to reconcile for all jobs. So you pick a range, a from to range if you just want to do some jobs, or again, you can run that for all. Reconcile bill codes works the same way. As does the subcontractor. There is another utility here. I'll just point out the recreate job master summary. This is not something you should have to run on a monthly basis. It can be very time consuming if you run it from the UI. Basically what this one does is it rebuilds the tables that are used to create the POC, revenue recognition entry. The time that you do want to run it is if you print your POC edit list and then you print your POC posting journal. If the numbers are different, that means there's a job in there where that needs to get the detail and master summary tables in line. So in that case, you would come in here and run it just for that individual job. Okay, next we'll talk about closing jobs. So in the closed job window, there's a couple of reports. The first one prints jobs available for closing. So if you'll also see all the jobs in the window, and if you don't see a job that you want to close or you think you can close, there's a couple of report options. First one on that in the same window, job preparation closing. This one will show jobs and the reasons as to why the job cannot be closed. So for example, there might be a payable transaction sitting in a batch that hasn't been posted, but if it has a job assigned to it, you can't post the job. Some other, I'll show you the setup options in a window in a second. Another one might be that the job hasn't been fully billed out yet. Implementation Specialist also has a tool, a job closing report that goes even deeper than the one that comes with KEY2ACT. And again, this one will show reasons as to why jobs cannot be closed. It's SQL based, has 16 sub-reports, so it's checking tables, all kinds of tables for different transaction types and such. And when you close jobs, we'll look at the window, and after they're closed, there's a job history window, so you can go back. It's just like job status, except it's all closed jobs, but you can still look at the history and drill down on details and those kind of things. And if you close a job that by accident, or you need to reopen a job because more cost came in after you close it, KEY2ACT does have the ability to open a closed job. So under routines, here's the window. I only have one available. And the jobs that are available are driven by your setup options. So if we go to the posting options window, the lower right here, you see some of the options. Most of these, we do recommend that you leave them unmarked. First one, allow job to close if committed cost. Well, if you got a committed cost, that means you got a purchase order receiving transaction that's still going to come in. So usually most customers leave that one unmarked. The next one, allow job to close if net billed is not equal to expected contract. Again, by not having it marked, that's going to make sure that you bill out your retention at the end of the job, and it just ensures everything is going to get billed out. I have seen customers not use it. In their case, they did T&M jobs and they always billed a little more than what the actual cost plus markup came out to be. But that's not a real common thing. The other one, another option you have is only allow inactive jobs to be closed as a process. Some customers like to inactivate a job for a month or two. When you inactivate a job, no more costs can be posted to it. And that's just sort of a process thing. So now you notice I only had one job in there. If I change an option, see, now I can close any job, but again, you wouldn't want to close a job. Typically, you wouldn't want to close one if it hadn't been billed out yet. So I'm just going to set that back, and then look at the reports. So the available, just basically you're going to see a job listing. This one's the job preparation for closing. So So you can see any job that can't be closed here, it'll show the reason. First one, difference between net billed and expected contract. So again, it's checking to make sure you've billed everything. This one has an unposted inventory transaction, unposted GL transaction. So it's going to tell you why you can't close each job. That one can also be printed for an individual job from job maintenance. One of the top reasons you can't close a job is you haven't released subcontractor retention if you're using subcontractors. Back to the PowerPoint. So KEY2ACT comes with several options for WIP reconciliation. There's a tool under routines, compares job cost subledger to the GL accounts. And then there's some WIP reports that you can use for reconciliation. So use these reports to identify, obviously, discrepancies, and you want to make your corrections before you finish out the revenue recognition process and close out the month. So for these WIP reports, there are DEX versions. The SQL ones are better. If you've fully deployed your SQL reports, you're going to get these when you print from this window. So you enter your date range and pick your type. This is coming up. Job cost transactions not in GL. This is bad sample data. So you see a whole bunch of stuff out here, but basically this would be the main thing that's going to show up here is if you're not posting like payables, POP, receivings, those kind of transactions, if you're not posting through the general ledger, this usually means there's a GL batch that needs to be posted. So those amounts hit the general ledger accounts as well. Then there's one that goes the other way. Something is in the GL, but it's not in job costs. So this could be a user accidentally entered a GL entry to a WIP account and it never went to a job. These reports, by the way, also work. Service management has their own versions of these reports. The WIP reconciliation tool I meant to show you under routines, it's right here. This also works with service management. So you can pick a GL account, your date range, and can also dump these into Excel and do things in Excel to get more information and zero in on discrepancies. Some other reports that are going to help you with the reconciliation process. We just talked about the WIP ones. There's over/under billing reports. For customer retention on billings, there's an AR retention trial balance report. Progress billings, there's a subcontractor retention report. There's a nice SQL report, job profit and loss, where you can go back to periods and reconcile things like contract earned. And let's see. So for example, here is the retention report. So with this one, you pick your division first, and you can have a cutoff date. And what it's going to show you for each job, it's going to show the invoice, retention withheld, and retention billed, and then the balance to be remaining. And then at the end of the report, let's see, this is second page. So this total should tie to the GL account that you have for retention. Retention still due. So when you do your all your reconciliations and adjustments, and I would say you want to do those on a monthly basis, so you don't have to go too far back. And you can do those mid-month as well. Some other things you want to do before you finish off with your revenue recognition: post all open batches all the way through the GL for the month. You want to do forecast revisions. Project managers should do forecast revisions on their jobs if they know there's going to be cost overruns, those kind of things. So either whoever's doing those forecast revisions, the accounting folks or the project managers, you want to do them right before the end of the month to get as accurate a picture as you can when you do your revenue recognition. You also want to increase revenue as much as you can. So you want to post your confirmed change orders, make sure there aren't any change orders sitting out there that haven't been posted yet. You want to complete and post your job billings for the month. Got to keep the cash coming in and bill as much as you can. Oops, sorry about that. A couple of reports for contract earned. So in addition to that SQL profit and loss, there's also percentage of completion SQL report. Let me open that one up. A couple of reports here. So this one, you have to go out to the browser. You have to view it in a browser. So there's a signature job cost folder. And this one has a lot of nice parameters, so you can set it to an individual project manager, division, period in time, include open, active. And so this is one, a lot of real good information. And really your project manager should be monitoring using this report all along during the month. But, again, especially at the end of the month, make sure these numbers look good as far as getting as much contract earned as you can and increasing that percentage of completion. This is the profit and loss one I mentioned. So again, you can set your date range. You can do it by division, all divisions. You can also go back and look at closed jobs. At the end of the month, you'd want to include all open jobs, both active and inactive, because both active and inactive are going to be included on that revenue recognition entry. And this is what the report looks like. The other one, of course, is the POC edit list. After you've made all these adjustments, you print that. One last look at the POC edit list is going to be exactly what your POC entry is going to be. And then the final steps, the month-end close. So you have to close job cost before you can build and create and post that POC entry. Or also, if you're using the new RPO option, that's performance obligations, works the same way as POC. I'll just say you want to close out your GP modules first before closing job costs, except for GL, because you need the GL is going to get that final POC entry, and if you need any other adjustments for the overall P&L for the company, of course, you got to make a journal entry. And just close out those other modules to make sure no other costs sneak in there that wouldn't get picked up on the POC entry. You can always reopen them if you need to. You do the month-end close, then you build, review, and post the POC entry. There's also an option for loss recognition, and that has a process very similar to the POC process, where you build, review it, and post it after the month is closed. And if you find any errors, or you miss some big material cost amounts or something, you can always reopen the period and run the process again. Here's the month-end close. It's simple enough. You just hit close, and the POC entry is right here. Percentage of completion, you pick your period. It has to be a closed period. So you build it. Oops, already did that one. So that was March. Just got to close April 1st. Oh, I got unposted transactions. Okay, that figures. All right, so there are safeguards in there. Anyway, so you build that entry. There's a simple build, look at your reports, and post it. If you have to open a period, you go to this window, fiscal periods, and just uncheck the month. If POC has already been posted for that period, it's going to reverse it out, and then you'd make your adjustments, close the month, and do your POC again. And that's pretty much all I have. So with that, we can open it up for questions.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I have now taken everyone off of mute. So if you have any questions for Tim,
Haven't figured out the text or not, but maybe that's what that is.
Next time there's I'm sure.
maybe just a little background there. So, all right. Well, I don't see any questions in the panel either. So Tim, thank you so much on kind of covering those kind of procedures and steps, as well as some reports to help you in job cost month-end closing. If you do have questions, you can see our contact information on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So, oh, actually, 1 second here. Oh, we had a question come in, and it's actually a good one, Tim. Could you explain more about the RPO entry, which is the new capabilities there?
The RPOs, sure, let me. Revenue performance obligation, there's accounting changes where some customers, some companies may have to switch over from POC to revenue performance obligations. And that's, rather than do a percentage of completion, which is actual cost divided by forecast gives you percent complete. With revenue performance obligations, I think we'll be doing a session on this in the future. There's a bit involved in the setup, but basically you break the contract down into deliverables that the customer would sign off on, and you recognize piece by piece those deliverables or performance obligations as they're completed. So in a nutshell, that's what happens. KEY2ACT, you're going to use the same posting accounts, and again, there's going to be a month-end process, but you can mark these performance obligation codes as 100% complete throughout the month, or wait till the end of the month and do them that way.
Yes. Yep. So I know this revenue performance obligation, this was just a part of one of their latest releases, and publicly traded companies are first kind of obligated to comply, but soon private companies will have to go follow these standards as well.
I hope that answers your question. And like I said, I'm pretty sure we'll be doing another full session on that in the future,
Yeah.
near
Absolutely.
future.
Oh, another question that came in, is RPO available in 2015 R2? I don't know that off the top of my head, unless you do, Tim. I would have to check for you.
I'm pretty sure it's 2016 R2 or 2018.
Yep.
KEY2ACT didn't go back to 2015. There were considerable table changes and new tables, so they went back to 2016 R2. This is actually, I'm showing you 2016 R2, but not 2015.
Thanks, Tim. Good question. All right. Well, thank you for those questions. Also, thank you for attending. If we do want to have a deeper conversation on this topic, please let us know, and we'd be happy to do so. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.